The sky above Colony Hunseong burned red and orange as the Vrexian warships tore through the atmosphere. Their massive hulls blocked out the sun, casting shadows across the entire settlement. Taman stood on the rooftop of the colony's central defense tower, his rifle pressed tight against his shoulder as he watched the enemy descend like falling stars. "Sergeant, they're coming in from all sides," his communications officer shouted through the radio. Static crackled with each word, interference from the alien ships disrupting their signals. "We can't hold them much longer." Taman knew this already. He had known it from the moment the first Vrexian scout ship appeared in their system 3 days ago. Colony Hunseong was a farming settlement on the outer rim of human territory, home to 15,000 civilians who had come here to build a new life. They had basic defenses, a small garrison of 200 soldiers, and outdated weapons that were no match for an Imperial war fleet, but they had to try. "All units, focus on evacuation routes," Taman ordered into his radio. "Get every civilian to the transport ships. We hold the line until the last person is aboard." Around him, his squad moved with practiced efficiency. These were men and women he had trained with, fought beside, and trusted with his life. They knew the odds. They knew most of them would not see tomorrow. But not one of them hesitated. The first wave of Vrexian dropships landed in the eastern district. Their doors hissed open and soldiers poured out, tall reptilian creatures with 4 arms and armor that shimmered with energy shields. They moved through the streets with brutal efficiency, their plasma weapons cutting down anything that moved. Taman's squad opened fire from their elevated positions. His rifle bucked against his shoulder with each shot, the crack of gunfire mixing with the screams of civilians running for the transport zone. He watched his bullets strike Vrexian armor, seeing sparks fly as the energy shields absorbed most of the impact. It took 3 or 4 shots to bring one enemy down, and there were hundreds of them. "West transport is loaded and launching," a voice reported through the radio. That was 3,000 civilians safe, 12,000 to go. The battle raged for hours. Taman moved through the colony like a ghost, repositioning his squad, setting up ambushes, doing everything he could to buy more time. His uniform was soaked with sweat and blood, some his own from a grazing plasma burn across his arm, most from carrying wounded soldiers to safety. By nightfall, the colony was in ruins. Buildings collapsed under Vrexian bombardment. Fires spread through residential sectors, and the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of plasma discharge. But the transports kept launching, each one carrying precious cargo away from the slaughter. "Last transport is loading now," Jiwoo's voice came through on the command channel. She was the colony's chief engineer, coordinating the evacuation from the launch pad. "We need 5 more minutes, 5 minutes. Taman looked at his remaining forces. Of his original 200 soldiers, maybe 40 were still fighting. They were exhausted, low on ammunition, and surrounded on 3 sides. "You heard her," he told his squad. 5 minutes. "We can do 5 minutes." They held an intersection 3 blocks from the transport pad, using overturned vehicles and debris as cover. The Vrexians came at them in waves, seemingly endless. Taman fired until his rifle overheated, then grabbed another from a fallen soldier and kept shooting. Beside him, his soldiers fought with everything they had. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. 2 minutes. "Transport is away," Jiwoo reported. "All civilians are evacuated. I repeat, all civilians are safe." Relief washed over Taman, but it lasted only a second. A massive explosion erupted behind him as a Vrexian artillery shell struck the building they were using for cover. The world turned to noise and chaos. Taman felt himself thrown through the air, his body slamming into something hard. Pain exploded through his ribs and skull. He tried to stand, but his legs would not respond. Dust and smoke filled his lungs, making him cough. Through blurred vision, he saw Vrexian soldiers approaching, their weapons aimed at the survivors. He reached for his rifle, but it was gone, lost somewhere in the rubble. A Vrexian officer stood over him, saying something in their clicking, hissing language. Taman could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. He was captured. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the transport ships, tiny dots of light climbing into the black sky, carrying 15,000 lives to safety. They had done it. The civilians were saved. When Taman woke, he was in a cell. The walls were smooth metal, glowing with a faint blue light. His hands were bound with energy restraints that hummed against his wrists. His head throbbed with pain and his ribs screamed with every breath. He tested the restraints carefully, pulling gently to gauge their strength. They did not budge. The cell door opened with a hiss. 3 Vrexian guards entered, followed by an officer wearing more elaborate armor decorated with symbols Taman did not recognize. The officer studied him with eyes that reflected light like a cat's. "Human soldier," the officer said in surprisingly good human language. "I am Commander Vexthul. You are now a prisoner of the Vrexian Empire." Taman said nothing. He had been trained for this scenario in basic combat school. Name, rank, and serial number. Nothing else. "You fought well," Vexthul continued, circling the cell slowly. "Your colony was supposed to fall in 1 hour. You held for 6. Very impressive for such primitive warriors." Still, Taman remained silent. "You cost us many soldiers," the commander said, and now there was an edge to his voice. 47 of my troops died in that pathetic little settlement." "This displeases me greatly." Vexthul leaned closer, his alien face inches from Taman's. "But you also interest me. Humans are a curious species. You fight without hope of victory. You sacrifice yourselves for the weak. This is illogical behavior. I wish to understand why." "Then you will be disappointed," Taman finally spoke, "because you will never understand." The commander's expression changed to something that might have been amusement. "We shall see. You are being transported to Detention Station Gorath 7. It is our most secure facility, designed specifically for studying difficult prisoners. Many of your kind are already there. Perhaps they will help you see reason." The guards dragged Taman from the cell. He was taken through corridors of the Vrexian ship, past rows of other prisoners from different species, all looking defeated and broken. Finally, they reached a docking bay where a prison transport waited. They threw him into a holding compartment with a dozen other human prisoners. Most were soldiers like him, captured from various battles, but some were civilians, engineers, and scientists taken from conquered colonies. They all wore the same haunted expressions, the look of people who knew their fate was sealed. That was when Taman first saw Jiwoo. She sat in the corner of the compartment, her engineer's uniform torn and dirty, her face bruised. When she saw him, her eyes widened in recognition. "Sergeant Taman," she whispered. "I thought you were dead." "They told us all the soldiers died. The civilians made it?" he asked urgently. She nodded. "Yes, all 15,000. The transports jumped to hyperspace before the Vrexians could stop them." Taman felt some of the weight lift from his chest. Whatever happened to him now, at least they had succeeded in that. The mission was complete. The people were safe. "Where are they taking us?" he asked. Jiwoo's expression darkened. "Gorath 7. I've been there for 2 months already. They bring me out sometimes to repair station systems. Sergeant, you need to know something. That place, it's not just a prison." "What do you mean?" "They experiment on humans there. They want to understand what makes us different, why we fight when other species surrender. I've seen things, terrible things. People go into the research wing and they don't come back." The transport shuddered as it launched from the Vrexian warship. Through the small window, Taman could see Colony Hanseong growing smaller, the fire still burning across its surface. His home was destroyed, his soldiers were dead, and now he was being taken to a place where aliens would try to break him down and discover humanity's secrets. But as he looked at Jiwoo and the other prisoners, Taman made a decision. He was not broken yet. He was tired, wounded, and captured, but he was still a soldier, and soldiers do not give up just because the situation looks hopeless. "Tell me everything about Gorath 7, he said quietly to Jiwoo. "Every detail you can remember. The layout, the guard rotations, the weak points in their security." She looked at him with disbelief. "You can't be serious. No one escapes from Gorath 7. It's orbital, floating in space. Even if you got out of your cell, there's nowhere to go." Taman leaned back against the cold metal wall of the transport, closing his eyes. His body ached and his mind was exhausted, but somewhere deep inside, a spark still burned. The same spark that had kept him fighting for 6 hours against impossible odds. The same spark that made humans different from every other species the Vrexians had conquered. "Just tell me," he said. "I want to know everything." As the transport carried them toward their prison, Jiwoo began to speak. She described the station's layout, the guard patterns, the systems she had been forced to repair. Taman listened to every word, filing away each detail, building a map in his mind. Detention Station Gorath 7 was everything Jiwoo had described and worse. The facility hung in the darkness of space like a massive metal spider, its 8 arms extending from a central hub that housed the command center. Each arm was a prison block containing hundreds of cells, interrogation rooms, and the research facilities that Jiwoo had warned him about. Tymene was processed like cargo. The Vrexians stripped him of his torn uniform, scanned his body with devices that hummed and beeped, and implanted a tracking chip beneath the skin of his neck. The procedure was done without anesthesia, the pain sharp and immediate. He did not cry out. He would not give them that satisfaction. His cell was 3 meters by 3 meters, all smooth metal walls that glowed with soft blue light. There was a sleeping platform, a waste disposal unit, and nothing else. The door was solid, no windows or bars, just seamless metal that sealed shut with a hiss. Every 6 hours, a slot would open and a tray of food would slide through. The food was a gray paste that tasted like cardboard but provided nutrition. For the first week, they left him alone. Tymene used the time to recover from his injuries, to exercise in the limited space, and to think. He did push-ups until his arms trembled, ran in place until sweat poured down his face, and practiced every combat move he could remember. The Vrexians might have his body locked in a cell, but his mind remained free. On the 8th day, they came for him. 4 guards entered his cell with weapons drawn. They attached restraints to his wrists and ankles, then led him through corridors of the station. Tymene observed everything: the spacing of security cameras, the pattern of patrol routes, the locations of access panels. Every detail was important. Every piece of information could be useful later. They brought him to an interrogation room. It was larger than his cell, with a single chair in the center bolted to the floor. Strange devices lined the walls, medical equipment mixed with machinery whose purpose he could only guess. Commander Vexthul waited there along with 2 technicians wearing protective gear. "Sit," the commander ordered. Tymene sat. The guard secured his restraints to the chair. Vexthul circled him slowly. "We are going to have many conversations, you and I. My empire wishes to understand your species. Humans are unique among the races we have encountered. Most species surrender when they realize they cannot win, but humans fight until the last breath. This fascinates us. So you capture us and torture us to satisfy your curiosity?" Tymene said. "Very civilized." The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Torture? No. We are scientists. We seek knowledge through proper experimentation." One of the technicians approached with a device that looked like a crown made of wires and pulsing lights. They placed it on Tymene's head. Immediately his vision filled with white light, and his skull felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. He gritted his teeth against the pain. "This device reads neural patterns," Vexthul explained. "It allows us to see your thoughts, your memories. Very useful for extracting information." For hours they probed his mind. They asked questions about human military positions, about weapons technology, about defense strategies. The neural scanner made it difficult to lie. When he tried to think of false information, the machine detected the deception and sent jolts of pain through his nervous system. When he tried to think of nothing, the pain intensified until he thought his head would explode. But Tymene had been trained for this. Not specifically for alien neural scanners, but for resisting interrogation in general. The key was to focus on real memories, but ones that contained no useful information. He thought about his childhood, about learning to swim in the ocean, about his mother's cooking. He filled his mind with true but useless details. The Vrexians grew frustrated. After 6 hours, they removed the neural scanner and returned him to his cell. Tymene collapsed on his sleeping platform, his head pounding, his body shaking with exhaustion. But he had not broken. He had given them nothing of value. This pattern continued for 3 weeks. Every few days they would take him for interrogation. They tried different devices, different techniques. They used drugs that made him dizzy and confused. They used sound frequencies that caused nausea and disorientation. They showed him images of Earth burning, claiming his homeworld had been destroyed, trying to break his spirit with despair. Tymene endured it all. Between interrogations, he maintained his exercise routine, kept his mind sharp by reciting poetry and solving math problems in his head. He also observed the station's operations through the small details. The guards who brought food were less alert during their night shifts. The maintenance drones that cleaned the corridors followed predictable paths. The air recycling system created subtle vibrations in the walls at regular intervals. He was building a picture of Gorath 7, piece by piece. On the 23rd day of his captivity, everything changed. They came for him during what passed for evening in the station's artificial day-night cycle. But this time they did not take him to the interrogation room. Instead, they brought him to a larger chamber that looked like an amphitheater. Rows of seats surrounded a central platform. Dozens of Rexian officers sat watching. Jiwoo was already there, restrained in a similar chair to the one Taemin had experienced during interrogations. Her face was bruised, fresh injuries from rough handling. When she saw him, her eyes widened with fear. "What is this?" Taemin demanded. Commander Vexthul stood on the platform addressing the assembled officers. "We have been attempting to extract information from this human soldier for weeks with no success. His resistance is remarkable but ultimately futile. Today we will demonstrate a more effective technique." He gestured to Jiwoo. "This female was captured from the same colony. She is a civilian, not military. She has been cooperative, helping us maintain station systems. But her usefulness has limits." Vexthul turned to Taemin. "You will provide us with human military encryption codes. Specifically, the command-level protocols used by your defensive fleets. If you refuse, we will execute this female. You have 1 minute to decide." Taemin's mind raced. The encryption codes the commander wanted were vital. If the Vrexians obtained them, they could intercept human communications, predict fleet movements, and coordinate devastating attacks. Thousands of lives could be lost. But Jiwoo was here now, staring at him with terror in her eyes. 30 seconds, Vexthul said calmly. "Don't tell them anything," Jiwoo said, her voice shaking but firm. "Sergeant, don't give them those codes. My life isn't worth thousands of others." Silence. A guard struck her across the face. Taemin felt rage building in his chest like a fire. These aliens thought they understood humans. They thought they could break human will by threatening the weak. But they had made a mistake. They had shown their cruelty, their disregard for life, their belief that violence always won. 10 seconds, the commander said. Taemin met Jiwoo's eyes. He tried to convey reassurance, tried to tell her without words that this was not over. Then he looked at Vexthul and said, "No." The commander tilted his head. "You refuse? Even knowing what will happen?" "I refuse because of what will happen," Taemin said. "You think killing her will break me? You're wrong. It will show me exactly what kind of monsters you are, and when I get out of here I will remember." Vexthul made a dismissive gesture. "When you get out? You truly are delusional. Very well. We will proceed with the execution at dawn tomorrow. Perhaps a night to reconsider will change your mind. If not, you can watch her die knowing you could have saved her." The guards took them away to separate cells, but as they moved through the corridors, Taemin managed to position himself close to Jiwoo for just a moment. "The ventilation shafts," he whispered so quietly, only she could hear. "You said they connect to the service tunnels. What?" Jiwoo's voice was barely audible. "Tomorrow, when they come for you, fight back. Create chaos. Then get to the vents in the execution chamber. I'll find you." "That's impossible. You're locked in a cell." "Not for much longer," Taemin said as the guards pulled them apart. Back in his cell, Taemin did not sleep. He could not afford to. For weeks he had been observing, learning, planning. He had noticed that the cell door's locking mechanism was controlled by a magnetic seal. The guard who brought food always stood at a specific angle, creating a blind spot from the security camera. And most importantly, he had been hiding something. During one interrogation session, when they had used electrical shocks as part of their torture, a small component from one of their devices had broken loose. A piece of metal no bigger than his thumb, sharp on one end, narrow enough to fit into small spaces. Taemin had palmed it when the guards were distracted by his convulsions. He had been carrying it in his mouth ever since, hidden under his tongue. Now, in the darkness of his cell, he worked. The tracking chip they had implanted in his neck was a problem, but not an insurmountable one. Using his hidden piece of metal, he made a small incision in his skin. The pain was intense, but he had experienced worse during interrogations. He dug the chip out and crushed it beneath his heel. They would know something was wrong soon, but it did not matter. He only needed a few hours. The station's artificial dawn arrived with dim lights gradually brightening throughout the corridors. Taemin had been moving through the service tunnels for hours, positioning himself near the execution chamber. His body ached from weeks of captivity, and the fresh wound on his neck where he had removed the tracking chip throbbed with pain, but his mind was clear and focused. He could hear activity in the main corridor beyond the service tunnel. Guards assembling for the execution. Officers gathering to witness what they thought would be a lesson in human weakness. They expected to see a prisoner broken by the threat of watching an innocent person die. They expected Taemin to beg, to offer the information they wanted in exchange for Ji-woo's life. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Through a ventilation grate, Taemin watched as they brought Ji-woo into the execution chamber. She was restrained but walking on her own, her head held high despite the bruises on her face. The Vrexian guards pushed her roughly toward a platform in the center of the room. Commander Vexthul stood nearby, along with perhaps 30 other officers and guards. "Bring the human soldier," Vexthul ordered. 2 guards went to retrieve Taemin from his cell. Taemin listened to their footsteps fading down the corridor. He counted in his head, timing their route. They would reach his cell, find it empty, and sound the alarm. He had maybe 2 minutes. He used the time to survey the execution chamber through the grate. 6 guards were positioned around Ji-woo. Commander Vexthul stood on a raised platform with 3 other officers. The chamber had 2 main entrances and emergency exits at the corners. Most importantly, he could see the ventilation shaft opening that Ji-woo needed to reach. The alarm sounded throughout the station, a harsh wailing that made the Vrexians freeze in confusion. Vexthul immediately grabbed a communication device from his belt. "Report," he snapped. "Commander, the human prisoner has escaped his cell. Security systems show no breach, no signs of forced entry. He simply vanished. Impossible. Find him, lock down all sections. He cannot have gone far." But Taemin had gone far. He was already here in the walls watching them scramble. He kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped into the execution chamber. The nearest guard died before he understood what was happening. Taemin drove his sharpened piece of metal through the gap in the alien's armor where the helmet met the neck. Purple blood sprayed as the Vrexian fell. Taemin took the guard's energy rifle and fired in one smooth motion, dropping a second guard. Chaos erupted. Officers shouted orders. Guards raised weapons. But Taemin was already moving, using the confusion and the bodies as cover. He fired 3 quick shots, taking down the guards around Ji-woo. "The vent," he shouted to her. "Go now." Ji-woo did not hesitate. She ran toward the ventilation shaft opening while Taemin provided covering fire. Energy blasts filled the air around him, burning through the walls, melting metal. He felt one shot sear past his shoulder, leaving a line of burnt flesh. He ignored the pain and kept shooting. Vexthul had taken cover behind a control console, screaming into his communicator. "All units to the execution chamber. The human prisoner is here. Kill him!" Taemin threw himself behind a fallen guard's body as return fire intensified. He counted rounds, measured distances, planned his next move. The execution chamber had become a battlefield, and he was outnumbered 6-1 with more enemies coming. Any sane person would have run, but Taemin had stopped being sane the moment they threatened Ji-woo. Now he was something else, something dangerous. He waited for a pause in the shooting, then moved, not toward the exit, but toward the officers. He fired as he ran, his shots precise despite the movement. 2 more Vrexians fell. He reached the platform where Vexthul was hiding and vaulted over the console. The commander's eyes widened in shock. Taemin slammed the rifle into his face, cracking the alien's facial plates. Vexthul staggered backward, reaching for his sidearm. Taemin was faster. He grabbed the commander's weapon and fired point blank into the chest of an officer attempting to flank him. "You wanted to understand humans?" Taemin said, his voice cold. "Let me educate you." He grabbed Vexthul and used him as a shield, backing toward the emergency exit. The remaining guards held their fire, unwilling to shoot their commander. Taemin made it to the door and kicked it open. He threw Vexthul back into the chamber and disappeared into the corridor beyond. Behind him, he could hear the commander screaming orders. "Find him. Find the female. I want them both dead." Taemin ran through the corridors, following the route Ji-woo had described to the service tunnels. Alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. He could hear boots pounding on metal floors as guards mobilized from every section. He found Ji-woo waiting at an intersection of service tunnels, just where he had told her to be. She looked at him with amazement and terror mixed together. "You killed 6 guards in less than a minute," she said. "How?" "Training," Taemin replied shortly. "And motivation." "Are you hurt?" "Just bruises." "Sergeant, what's your plan? The whole station is looking for us now." "There's nowhere to hide." Taemin checked the energy rifle he had taken. "Half charge remaining. Not enough for a prolonged fight, but enough. We're not hiding. I need you to take me to the security control center." "Can you do that?" "The security center? That's in the command hub. It will be heavily guarded. I'm counting on it. As they moved through the service tunnels, Taemin questioned Jiwoo about the station's layout. She described the security systems, the guard stations, the areas she had accessed during her maintenance work. He learned that Gorath 7 had approximately 1,000 Vrexian soldiers assigned as guards and security personnel. The station also held about 300 prisoners from various species, most in cells similar to what he had been kept in. 1,000 soldiers. Taemin repeated. Good. Jiwoo stared at him. Good? Sergeant, I know you're well trained, but you can't fight 1,000 soldiers. I don't plan to fight them fairly, he said. You told me you've been repairing station systems. Which systems? Mostly power distribution and atmospheric controls. They have me maintain the environmental processors because I'm smaller than Vrexians and can fit into the maintenance spaces they can't access easily. Taemin stopped walking. An idea was forming in his mind, terrible and brilliant. The atmospheric controls. Can you access them remotely? There are terminals throughout the station, but they require security clearance. What about from the security control center? Yes, from there you could access any system on the station. But Sergeant, what are you thinking? Before he could answer, they heard voices approaching. A patrol of Vrexian guards was coming through the service tunnel, moving methodically, searching for them. Taemin pulled Jiwoo into a side passage and held up his hand for silence. 4 guards passed their hiding spot, weapons ready, moving in tight formation. They were being careful, professional. These were trained soldiers, not the ceremonial guards from the execution chamber. Taemin waited until they passed, then emerged behind them silently. 2 quick shots to the rear guards. They fell without making a sound. The front 2 guards spun around, but Taemin was already on them. He used the rifle as a club, striking the first one in the throat. The alien made a choking sound and collapsed. The 4th guard managed to get a shot off, but Taemin had moved, the energy blast missing by centimeters. He closed the distance and drove his knee into the guard's midsection, then finished with a strike to the head. 4 more dead. 10 total since his escape. Jiwoo emerged from the hiding spot, looking at the bodies with horror. This is insane. You're going to get us both killed. We're already dead, Taemin said, taking ammunition packs from the fallen guards. The moment they captured us, we became casualties. The only question is how many of them we take with us. Is that what you want? To die taking revenge? Taemin looked at her, his expression hard. I want them to understand that every human they capture, every prisoner they torture, every civilian they threaten comes with a price. I want them to think twice before they attack another human colony. And if that means I die here, then I die here. But you don't have to. Tell me how to reach the security center, then find a shuttle and escape. Jiwoo shook her head. No. If you're doing this insane thing, you'll need my help. I know the systems. You know, combat. We work together. Despite everything, Taemin felt a flash of respect for this engineer who had spent months as a prisoner and still had fight left in her. Together then. Show me the way. They navigated through the service tunnels toward the station's central hub. Along the way, they encountered 3 more patrols. Each time, Taemin used the narrow corridors to his advantage. The Vrexians were larger and stronger, but in confined spaces their numbers meant nothing. He moved like water flowing around their attacks, striking from unexpected angles. By the time they reached the security control center, Taemin had killed 20 guards. His body was covered in burns from near misses with energy weapons. His stolen rifle was almost out of charge, but his determination had not wavered. The security center was protected by a reinforced door and 6 guards in heavy armor. There was no way to approach without being seen. Any ideas? Jiwoo whispered. Commander Vexthul stood in the command center of Detention Station Gorath 7, staring at the security monitors in disbelief. In the past 3 hours, 32 of his soldiers had died. 32 trained warriors killed by 1 human prisoner who should have been weak from captivity and torture. How is this possible? He demanded of his security chief. He is 1 man. We have 1,000 soldiers on this station. Why has he not been found and eliminated? The security chief, an older Vrexian veteran named Krath, studied the tactical display. Commander, he is not fighting like a soldier anymore. He is using guerrilla tactics. Hit and run. He strikes from unexpected positions, kills quickly, and disappears before reinforcements arrive. And worse, he has taken control of our own security systems. Then take back control. Override the systems manually if necessary. We are trying, Commander. but the human female who was scheduled for execution is with him. She was a station engineer. She knows our systems better than some of our own technicians. Vexthul slammed his fist on the console. I want every available soldier searching for them. Check every corridor, every room, every service tunnel. They cannot hide forever. But Taman was not hiding. He was hunting. In Section C, a patrol of 10 Vrexian soldiers moved through a darkened corridor. The lights had been shut off by Jiwoo from the security center, forcing them to use helmet lamps. The beams of light cut through the darkness, sweeping back and forth. Spread out, the patrol leader ordered. Search every access panel and door. They did not see the service hatch opening in the ceiling above them. Taman dropped silently onto the rear guard, driving a blade made from sharpened metal into the gap in the armor. The Vrexian fell without a sound. Taman took the soldier's weapon and rolled into the shadows before the others noticed. Grek, where did you go? One soldier called out. A shot from the darkness answered. The soldier's helmet exploded in a shower of sparks and gore. The patrol scattered, taking cover behind support pillars and equipment containers. They fired blindly into the shadows, energy blasts lighting up the corridor in flashes of blue and white. But Taman was no longer where they were shooting. He had moved through a maintenance access, circled around, and was now behind them. He fired from the new position, dropping 2 more guards. The survivors panicked, shooting at each other in the confusion. When the shooting stopped, 9 bodies lay in the corridor. Taman collected their weapons and ammunition, added them to the growing cache he was building in hidden locations throughout the station. Through his stolen communicator, he heard Vrexian commanders trying to coordinate their forces. They were confused, frightened. They had never faced an enemy like this. Taman moved to his next position, Section B, near the station's main power generator. According to Jiwoo's information, the Vrexians were massing troops there, thinking he might try to sabotage the reactor. They were right, but not in the way they expected. He accessed a wall terminal and connected to Jiwoo, who was still safely hidden in the security control center. Status? He asked quietly. Guards are everywhere. They've tripled patrols in the main corridors, but I've been rerouting them away from your position as much as possible without being obvious. Good. I need you to do something. The waste reclamation system in Section B, can you reverse it? There was a pause. I can, but why would you want waste materials pumped into the corridors? Because the Vrexians breathe oxygen just like us, but they're not expecting to deal with toxic fumes. It will force them to evacuate that section. Into Section A, where you set up those improvised explosives. Exactly. How long until you can execute it? Give me 10 minutes. Taman used those 10 minutes to prepare. He had taken explosive charges from a mining equipment locker and positioned them throughout Section A. The charges were designed to break through rock and metal. When detonated in an enclosed corridor, they would turn the space into a death trap. He also prepared an escape route, marking his path with small scratches on the walls that only he would recognize, always thinking ahead, always planning the next move. The Vrexian soldiers in Section B smelled the toxic fumes before the alarm sounded. The waste reclamation system, normally a closed loop, had been reversed. Biological waste, chemical runoff, and contaminated water poured into the ventilation system. The stench was overwhelming. Evacuate the section, a squad leader ordered. Move to Section A. 50 soldiers retreated through the connecting corridor, coughing and gasping. They thought they were moving to safety. They were walking into an ambush. Taman waited until they were all inside the corridor, packed together, before triggering the explosives. The charges detonated in sequence, starting from the exit and working backward. The corridor became an inferno of fire and shrapnel. Soldiers screamed as metal fragments tore through their armor. The blast wave threw bodies against walls with bone-breaking force. When the dust settled, 43 Vrexian soldiers were dead. 7 had survived wounded and traumatized. They stumbled through the smoke, calling for help that would come too late. Taman moved through the aftermath like a ghost. He finished the survivors with quick, efficient shots. No torture, no cruelty, just the cold mathematics of combat. Then he disappeared back into the service tunnels before reinforcements arrived. The death toll had reached 85. In the command center, Commander Vexthul listened to the reports with growing horror. This is unacceptable. We are losing soldiers faster than we can deploy them. This human is turning our own station against us. Commander, we could evacuate, Krath suggested. Abandon the station and destroy it from a distance. Abandon? We would be a disgrace to the Empire. No, we end this now. Deploy the heavy assault units. Full armor, heavy weapons. I want them to sweep every section systematically. The heavy assault units were the Empire's elite soldiers, trained for boarding actions and siege warfare. 20 of them assembled in the main hangar bay, armed with plasma cannons and protected by powered armor that made them nearly invulnerable to small arms fire. They moved into the station in a tight formation, their sensors scanning for any sign of the human. They were confident, professional, expecting to end this embarrassment quickly. Taemin watched them from a security camera feed in Jiwoo's terminal. "Those are the heavy units you mentioned?" he asked. "Yes. Their armor is too thick for standard weapons to penetrate, and those plasma cannons can melt through bulkhead doors. Can you trigger the fire suppression system in the hangar bay?" "Yes, but that will just release foam. It won't hurt them. Not the foam, the halon gas. This station has halon fire suppression in certain areas, right?" Jiwoo checked her terminal. "Yes, in the reactor room and the ammunition storage. Halon displaces oxygen, but the hangar bay uses foam-based suppression. Can you reroute the halon system?" Understanding dawned on Jiwoo's face. "You want to suffocate them?" "Yes, I can redirect the halon to the hangar bay, but their suits have internal oxygen supplies. For how long? Maybe 20 minutes. Then we make them use up their oxygen faster. Stress them. Make them breathe hard." Taemin moved into position above the hangar bay, accessing a maintenance catwalk that ran along the ceiling. He had prepared surprise for the heavy assault unit. Improvised grenades made from fuel cells and chemical containers. Not powerful enough to breach their armor, but loud and bright. The assault unit spread out across the hangar floor, searching methodically. Taemin dropped the first grenade. It exploded in a flash of light and sound. The soldiers wheeled, firing at shadows. He dropped another grenade from a different position. "More shooting, more confusion. Where is he?" the unit commander shouted. "Spread out. Cover all angles." They were breathing harder now, adrenaline and stress increasing their oxygen consumption. Taemin dropped a third grenade, then activated the halon system through a manual override panel on the catwalk. Gas began flooding into the hangar bay. The Vrexians noticed immediately as their sensors detected the oxygen levels dropping. Their suits automatically switched to internal supplies. "He's trying to suffocate us," the commander said. "Stay calm. We have enough oxygen. Find him and end this." But staying calm was difficult when grenades kept exploding around them, when they could not see their target, when their comrades were dying throughout the station. The assault unit moved faster, their movements becoming jerky and panicked. They burned through their oxygen supplies. 15 minutes. 18 minutes. 20 minutes. The first soldier collapsed, his oxygen exhausted. Then another. The commander ordered a retreat, but Taemin had sealed the hangar bay doors. They were trapped. 23 minutes. The heavy assault unit, the elite soldiers of the Vrexian Empire, fell one by one. Their powerful armor and heavy weapons meant nothing when they could not breathe. Taemin waited until the last one stopped moving, then vented the halon and opened the doors. He moved among the bodies, taking what supplies he could carry. Ammunition, medical supplies, communication devices. The death toll had reached 105. Throughout the station, word spread among the surviving Vrexians. The human was not trying to escape. He was not hiding. He was systematically killing every soldier on the station. Fear began to replace discipline. Guards started refusing patrol assignments. Some tried to flee to their... The spacesuit was too large for Taemin, designed for Vrexian physiology. He had to adjust the seals manually, using maintenance tape to prevent air leaks. The helmet was uncomfortable, pressing against his skull in wrong places, but it would keep him alive in the vacuum of space, and that was all that mattered. Jiwoo helped him into the airlock that led to the exterior maintenance shaft. Through the small window they could see the stars beyond, cold and distant. The station rotated slowly, giving the illusion of gravity inside but creating disorientation for anyone working on the hull. "The shaft runs along the outer hull for 200 meters, Jiwoo explained, her voice coming through the suit's communication system. "When you reach the fourth junction, there will be an access port that leads directly into the atmospheric processing center. I will override the locks remotely. What about the guards inside the processing center? Normally, there would be a maintenance crew of 3 or 4. But with the alert status, they have probably pulled everyone to the command hub for defense. You should have a clear path. Taemin checked his weapons one final time. The energy rifles would not work in vacuum, their cooling systems requiring atmosphere. But he had taken several Vrexian blade weapons, long knives designed for close combat. If he encountered resistance inside, he would deal with it silently. Once I'm inside, how long until the guards realize what I'm doing? Jiwoo consulted her portable terminal. If you work quickly, maybe 5 minutes before the atmospheric changes become noticeable. Another 5 minutes before they understand what is happening. By then it will be too late to stop you. And the shuttle for your escape? Docking Bay 3. I have pre-programmed the launch sequence. As soon as your mission is complete, I will evacuate. No, Taemin said firmly. You evacuate in 30 minutes regardless of whether I succeed. If I'm not done by then, it means I failed. Don't wait for me. Jiwoo wanted to argue, but she knew it was pointless. She had learned that Taemin, once he made a decision, would not be swayed. 30 minutes, understood. He placed his gloved hand against the airlock window and she pressed her hand to the other side. A moment of connection between two humans who had survived held together. Make them remember, Jiwoo said softly. I will. The airlock cycled. Air hissed out into space. The outer door opened. Taemin stepped into the void. The exterior of Detention Station Gorath 7 was a nightmare of exposed machinery, antenna arrays, and cooling vents. The station's rotation created a gentle but constant pull that tried to fling him into space. Taemin clipped his safety line to the guide rail and pulled himself along hand over hand. The maintenance shaft was a narrow tunnel cut into the hull, barely wide enough for a Vrexian to crawl through. For Taemin it was claustrophobic, the metal walls pressing close on all sides. He could hear nothing but his own breathing inside the helmet and the creaking of the station's structure as it flexed and bent. He counted junctions as he passed them. First junction, nothing unusual. Second junction, where several maintenance conduits met. Third junction, where he had to navigate around a cluster of sensor equipment. Fourth junction, the access port was exactly where Jiwoo had said it would be, a circular hatch with a manual override wheel. Taemin grabbed the wheel and turned. The mechanisms were stiff from disuse fighting him. He put his full strength into it, muscles straining. The wheel moved inch by inch. Finally, the locks disengaged. The hatch swung open into darkness beyond. Taemin pulled himself through and found himself in a small equipment room adjacent to the main atmospheric processing center. The room held spare parts, tools, and diagnostic equipment. He closed the hatch behind him and waited for the space to pressurize. Lights flickered on automatically. Atmosphere returned with a hiss. When the indicators showed safe levels, Taemin removed his helmet. The atmospheric processing center lay beyond a simple door. He drew one of his Vrexian blades and opened the door slowly, expecting guards. The center was empty. It was a vast room filled with machinery that hummed and throbbed with mechanical life. Massive processors filtered and recycled air for the entire station. Temperature controls maintained livable conditions. Pressure regulators prevented explosive decompression. All of it monitored and controlled from a central terminal. Taemin approached the terminal carefully, watching for security systems or booby traps. But the Vrexians had never expected an attack from outside the station. Their security focused inward on keeping prisoners contained. The atmospheric center was unguarded because no prisoner could reach it. He accessed the terminal, grateful that Jiwoo had taught him the basics of the Vrexian control systems during their brief time together. The interface was logical, designed for efficiency rather than security. First, he locked down all manual overrides. If the guards realized what he was doing and tried to stop it physically, they would find every backup system disabled. Next, he began making changes to the atmospheric mix. Not dramatic changes that would trigger immediate alarms. Small adjustments, subtle shifts that would take time to notice. He reduced oxygen levels by 2%, still breathable, but it would make the Vrexians feel slightly winded, slightly tired. Then he began introducing gases from the station's industrial sectors. Carbon dioxide from the waste processors, nitrogen from the coolant systems, trace amounts of volatile chemicals from the mining equipment storage. Individually, none of these changes would be dangerous. Combined and concentrated in the command hub where 600 soldiers were gathered, they would create a toxic mixture that would first incapacitate and then kill. As he worked, Taemin heard Jiwoo's voice through his communicator. Taemin, I'm seeing unusual readings from the atmospheric sensors. What are you doing? Exactly what needs to be done. How long until the guards notice? They are already noticing. The soldiers in the command hub are reporting difficulty breathing. The security chief just ordered an investigation of the atmospheric systems. Can you delay them? I will try. But Taemin, these levels you are creating will kill everyone in the command hub within an hour. I know. There was silence on the communication line. Then Jiwoo spoke again, her voice sad. You are not planning to survive this, are you? Surviving was never the point, Taemin said as he entered more commands. The point was making sure they understand. Making sure they never forget what it costs to treat humans as experiments and prisoners. You've already killed over 100 soldiers. Is that not enough? No. Because if I stop now, if I escape, they will rebuild this station. They will capture more humans. They will continue their research. This has to end completely and permanently. He finished programming the atmospheric changes and locked the terminal. Even if the Vrexians managed to reach this room, even if they killed him, the changes were now automated and irreversible. The command hub would become a gas chamber. It's done, he said. Jiwoo, get to the shuttle now. Taemin. Now, that's an order. He could hear her moving, her footsteps echoing through her communicator. I am going. But Taemin, listen to me. What you have done here, what you have sacrificed, it matters. I will make sure everyone knows. I will tell them about Sergeant Taemin, who fought 1,000 soldiers and won. You will be remembered as a hero. I'm not a hero, Taemin replied. Heroes save people. I just made the aliens pay. Sometimes that's the same thing. The sound of a shuttle launching reached him through the station's structure, a deep, thrumming vibration. Jiwoo was safe. One part of his mission was complete, now for the rest. The door to the atmospheric processing center exploded inward. Vrexian soldiers poured through, weapons ready. They were wearing emergency respirators, having realized too late what was happening to their air supply. Taemin had prepared for this. He had positioned himself behind the main processor units, using them as cover. As the soldiers entered, he opened fire with one of his remaining energy rifles. 3 guards fell before they located his position. Return fire tore through the machinery around him. Sparks flew. Coolant sprayed from ruptured pipes. Taemin kept shooting, kept moving, using the complex machinery as a maze to frustrate their superior numbers. A Vrexian soldier appeared from behind a processor unit, weapon raised. Taemin dropped his rifle and drew a blade, moving inside the alien's reach. The blade found the gap in the armor at the shoulder joint. The soldier fell. Taemin took his weapon and continued fighting. More soldiers poured in. 10, then 20, then 30. They were desperate now, realizing that if they did not stop Taemin, everyone in the command hub would die. But desperation made them sloppy. They pushed forward without caution, and Taemin punished every mistake. He led them deeper into the machinery, into narrow spaces between massive processors where only one soldier could advance at a time. There, numbers meant nothing. There, it was skill against skill, and Taemin had been trained by the best soldiers humanity could produce. He killed methodically, efficiently, each movement precise. Block, counter, strike, blade work when they got close, gunfire when they kept their distance. His body was running on adrenaline and determination alone. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent pain shooting through injured muscles. But he did not stop, cannot stop, must not stop. A plasma blast caught him in the leg. He went down, his knee buckling. Up,